We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we thought about it carefully over many months. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself.
What's up, guys? Boy, Benny, we try as hard as we can to be anatomically and factually correct on this program. And so when we say that somebody's got big balls, let's go ahead and check. The biggest balls on any animal species are those of the right whale, each of which weigh as much as 500 kilograms, 1,000 pounds. Oh, okay. Those are apparently the biggest balls in the animal kingdom. But ladies and gentlemen, it turns out that Google is incorrect in this query. In fact, the biggest balls are of Tucker Carlson, seen here leaving the Kremlin in Moscow. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Seen here, leaving the Kremlin in Moscow. Tucker Carlson with a shot defiantly and triumphantly across the bow at the American State Department and at the American PSYOP infrastructure regime tentacles that have tried to suck dry the First Amendment and the rights that are founded therein. Ladies and gentlemen, Tucker Carlson practicing real journalism, traveling to a real place to interview a real president that has real consequences for the future of this country. It is important that you know this information. You are adult enough to know who Vladimir Putin is and hear his voice. And Tucker Carlson just admitted that he has interviewed Vladimir Putin, and from atop a building in Moscow explains why. Now, this video is 30 minutes old. It already has 4 million views. It already has 100,000 likes and 40,000 retweets. And so it stands to reason, ladies and gentlemen, that Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin is going to be the most watched interview in the history of the world. Tucker Carlson explains what he is doing in Moscow and why this is so important.
In Moscow tonight, we're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead, an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and it's depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the US dollar. These are not small changes. They are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like. And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that as nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tucker Carlson is, of course, explicitly correct there. Things are spiraling out of control quickly, and it's because of the craven lunacy of our ruling elite. Their mistaken inferences about Russia in the region, and their misunderstanding of their own power and the projection of that power or lack thereof. They have inherited a wonderful world, a table that was set for them quite beautifully by their forefathers who were much wiser and smarter. Don't entangle yourself in foreign wars, says George Washington at the very end of his 2 terms as president. But of course, we don't listen to those rules. We don't follow those pearls of wisdom from wiser, smarter men. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are now to be lied to by our press. Most Americans are not informed. We're here because we love the U.S., Tucker Carlson explains, while he is interviewing Vladimir Putin. As the left freaks out about Tucker Carlson's upcoming interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin, former Fox News host, who can now be found at tuckercarlson.com, has published a pre-interview explainer as to why he's interviewing Putin, which boils down to the uncurious Western media, which has resulted in a grossly uninformed public. Yes, it's true. There is an economic order and a global order that is unraveling very quickly because it was supposedly built on American values, but American values would be freedom of speech and freedom of information, freedom of knowledge, and, of course, a populace that acts upon that knowledge. But if you are able to starve out and choke out the points of knowledge and information, then you're able to make that populace dumber and compliant and slaves. And so Tucker Carlson, the great liberator, is there in Moscow, ironically, to free people. He explains.
For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they have done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway. Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again. But this time, we came to Moscow anyway. We are not here because we love Vladimir Putin. We are here because we love the United States, and we want it to remain prosperous and free. We paid for this trip ourselves. We took no money from any government or group, nor are we charging people to see the interview. It is not behind a paywall. Anyone can watch the entire thing, shot live to tape and unedited, on our website, tuckercarlson.com. Elon Musk, to his great credit, has promised not to suppress or block this interview once we post it on his platform, X, and we're grateful for that. Western governments, by contrast, will certainly do their best to censor this video on other less principled platforms because that's what they do. They are afraid of information they can't control. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself.
Like a free citizen and not a slave. Your government wants you to be a slave. That is an absolute matter of verifiable fact. Yes, Tucker Carlson was spied on by our intel agencies to stop a Putin interview when he was under the corporate thumb of Fox News. That effectively killed the Putin interview. They were able to manipulate Tucker into not doing it, or at the very least, Tucker's paymasters. Now, Tucker's paymasters are you and me. We subscribe to tuckercarlson.com. We follow Tucker's work on X. And of course, now Tucker Carlson is free to travel to Russia as an American citizen with rights, innate and intrinsic and natural, and to go and interview Vladimir Putin. That is exactly what he has done. Now, this Putin interview is not released yet, but it will absolutely and without question be the most watched interview in human history. I have no doubt. Tucker Carlson's interview with Javier Milei, the much less interesting and less newsworthy, although kind of awesome, president of Argentina, got 500 million views on X. And ladies and gentlemen, I expect the Putin interview will do 1 billion. Tucker Carlson's often talked about how the agents of the press are effectively tools of the intel agencies. I'm thinking about one national security reporter in particular who's a mouthpiece of the Pentagon and the CIA and is knowingly telling lies on their behalf, Tucker says in interviews. Tucker Carlson has also spoken at length about the spying on his email in order to prevent him from interviewing Putin the first time. This is before the war in Ukraine. It makes you wonder what they knew.
Hiding my plan to go interview Putin just because it's an interview.
So how did that happen?
Business.
How do you know the NSA broke into your signal?
Because they admitted it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Like, can you tell us about that? Like, how did you find out?
I got a call from somebody in Washington who would know, just trust me, so I went up there for another reason, but this person said, you know, are you going to come to Washington anytime soon? This was a year and a half ago. And I was like, yeah, actually, I'm going to be up in a week. Meet me Sunday morning. So weird. Like, who does that? Just text me. You know what I mean? Just text me. No. So I go and this person's like, and this is someone who would know. Are you planning a trip to go see Putin? This was the summer before the war started. And I was like, how would you know that? I haven't told anybody. I mean, anybody, not my brother, not my wife, nobody. And just because, you know, it's one of a million things you're working on. But that was one of them. I want to go interview. Why wouldn't I want to interview Putin?
Of course.
I want to interview Xi. I want to interview everybody, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of my job.
We want to get Kim Jong-un on here one day.
Of course. We met him.
You did?
Yep.
Oh, we got to talk about that after. But continue
super
with this.
Interesting. But anyway,
Holy shit.
How would you know that? Because NSA pulled your text with this other person you were texting. How did you know that? And so I was intimidated. I'm embarrassed to admit.
So Tucker Carlson was intimidated out by his own accord, by his own admission. Tucker Carlson was intimidated out of his first interview with Vladimir Putin. Here is footage of Tucker Carlson heading to his next interview with Vladimir Putin. The interview that will drop presumably quite soon because Tucker is prepping his audience for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the world ain't ready. But I got to tell you, the same goblins and goons who hate free speech are planning on massive retaliation against Tucker Carlson. Perhaps we need a total and complete shutdown of Tucker Carlson re-entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what's going on. People from all sides of the all stripes of the political world are now calling for Tucker Carlson's deportation to their great and eternal shame. Ladies and gentlemen, CNN is losing their mind at Tucker Carlson in Russia interviewing Vladimir Putin. I'll remind you that American news outlets who have interviewed Putin over the last 10 years go like this: 60 Minutes, Bloomberg, the AP, NBC News, Showtime. That's just to name a few. I'm sure I'm missing some. So it has nothing to do with interviewing Vladimir Putin. It has everything to do with who's asking the questions and can they be controlled. And Tucker cannot. And this is why CNN is losing their ever-loving minds. We very much look forward to watching this interview and encourage you to pray for Tucker Carlson and for the freedom of speech. It only ever hangs on by the most perilous of threads. It must be practiced. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the opposite of freedom of speech. This is propaganda.
A massive shakeup in Kyiv coming as Putin is trying to court the MAGA GOP in the United States. In fact, one of the leaders of the MAGA GOP is in Moscow tonight. It's the man you see here with the MAGA leader Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson. Possibly there in Moscow to interview Putin. Definitely there as a Putin-supporting celebrity. Just listen to how Russian state media is breathlessly celebrating his visit.
Independent journalist Tucker Carlson has flown to Russia from the U.S. via Turkey to Vnukovo Airport. He saw Spartacus Ballet at the Bolshoi Theater, had lunch in a nice restaurant, went for a ride around town, rode the subway. He charged his smartphone via USB port and connected to a fast and free Wi-Fi internet.
He charged his phone, although they're knowing the details about the fact that it was during USB port may give him reason to think twice about all of this. But look at them talking about him like a celebrity. Everything he does on camera, breathlessly repeated. Now, it is unclear if an interview between Putin and Carlson will take place, but if it does, it gives Putin a chance to sit down with a big supporter.
It might be worth asking yourself, since it is getting pretty serious, what is this really about? Why do I hate Putin so much? Has Putin ever called me a racist? Has he threatened to get me fired for disagreeing with him? Does he eat dogs? These are fair questions, and the answer to all of them is no. Vladimir Putin didn't do any of that.
I'll actually always remember watching that clip. I was standing in Ukraine 48 hours before the war began there. Well, Carlson then stood by Putin consistently all the way through. And that is why he can go to Moscow now without any fear of being summarily imprisoned. He's a hero. This was Putin's mouthpiece in the United States, somebody who had turned a blind eye to the atrocities committed by Putin because they were happening far away. Once vibrant towns turned to ruins, mass graves with dozens of bodies in the Kyiv suburbs, a theater full of innocent women and children sheltering, bombed, despite the giant world's children written on the roof, more than 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers killed or injured. And tonight, Putin is trying to seize on the fact that Zelensky's military appears to be in turmoil, capitalizing on a moment of intense American political dysfunction